We're live.
Oh dear.
Welcome.
Goodbye, Superstar. Great song.
Welcome to Arvoyarns.
Arvoyarns episode 5?
Part 5.
Episode 5. Oh dear.
So now we can be seen, which changes.
It's such an honor,
which
honestly.
changes everything, really.
It's been such a long time coming, man.
It's got full hands.
To be presentable to these folks.
Sit in a certain way. So
does that mean we can't cut this video after when it's posted?
that's definitely what it means. Yeah,
So
it's just what it
the
is.
way it's live is the way it gets posted. Maybe you already know that. I'm finding that out for the first time. Hopefully some people are dumbfounded.
We could rip it from YouTube, edit it, delete this, re-upload it. If we really
just not
care,
worth
but that's probably
a lot. Man, how fake would we be from the outset? We wouldn't last very long.
We haven't seen how bad it'll get yet. So
no, but a lot of you people might see this episode, and this might be the first episode you ever see. So, in the spirit of that, the idea for this podcast is basically like Matt and I are friends, right? And the way
while you explain this, I suddenly have the desire to make sure the audio is actually being recorded.
That's a great idea. Anywho, how are you looking, Matt? Is it going good?
I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Da 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 da. Well, I have a thought.
Well,
continue.
All right. I guess I'll say it twice, right? Yeah, that's probably why it's happening, eh?
I'm just gonna record it twice.
Okay.
So, like, in case there's no audio on the video, we have some audio going on.
And you compare it with the video.
All else fails. Although that will bring us back to that situation of downloading the video, re-uploading it. So it looks like
we won't be fake in that case. We'll just actually have done the due diligence of fixing our fuck out. It's much more respectable.
Well, originally we wanted to use the 3D camera. Look at this.
Wanted to use this camera. It's pretty cool.
But, just shout out to Samsung. This doesn't really work very well because we plugged it in and tried to go live.
Samsung, you want to sponsor us?
Crashed.
Anyway, so
Samsung was sponsoring the renovation of this cathedral in Milan.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like redoing the cathedral, and it looked really terrible in the sense that like we go in there and like the lights are just sort of like super bright, fluorescent, and blinding. It's very distracting. But like a whole part of the edifice was covered up by a Samsung advertisement, like a big
it's disgusting.
Well, it made me imagine a world where like that could happen and it like wouldn't be disgusting.
That's a good point.
But then it was definitely disgusting.
Right. But that's what.
But I would like them better if they made freaking cameras that worked. Although
that's
this thing
the
is
great
cool.
thing about disgusting shit is it makes you think, wow, like the opposite of this would be so dope.
Yeah. By the way, I love how like
Take some contrast.
There's like on the video, like, depending on where you're sitting, it'll like color correct it differently.
Wow, that's
It was
technology.
it was sort of going back and forth.
I want to like think. I have this impulse to like think about people like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, but not necessarily the case that like I have them to think. But there's a certain programming that almost happens with these stories. We get obsessed with these figures, right? And these people that went on this long journey, and like there's really like this large team of people in the collective of society that sort of, in a lot of ways, it just confluences to the point of the impetus of like a single person or a small group of people or like co-founders or whatever, and then it ebbs out from there. But it was really like a collective measure of society for it to come to that point in the first place, right? You're not gonna fucking make a computer an ancient Rome because the infrastructure wasn't there for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean they tried. I mean they had a factory system and they had like mechanical computers in a way.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's going to bring up the Antikythera mechanism right now.
I was thinking about that.
And I guess I don't have anything to say, except for I guess I'm wrong.
But, I mean, in general, you're right.
Shout out to the Antikythera mechanism.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Well, that's true too.
So cool.
Didn't they find it at like the bottom of the sea?
Yeah, it was the bottom of the Mediterranean somewhere. Makes you think what else was there. It's so interesting that they built. It's so interesting how different places they build their worldview. Like when I lived in New Zealand, the Maori people, which are the native people to the land. I mean, in a way, what's native? I mean, they got there like less than 2,000 years ago. Is anything really native, or are we all sort of renting space in reality? But for the sake of, the way people use words and shit, we'll say native. And they believe in this idea called Taonga Whenua, which is living land. And, maybe it translates to like the land that breathes. I'm probably fucking it up. Somebody let me know. Hopefully. If somebody's watching, that would be useful, right? That'll be awesome when we like have people that are like, yeah, this is dope enough that I'll comment that you're wrong.
Yeah, I can see the text box where it would appear.
Where it would appear when somebody's
be
like
there.
I don't actually know if I want to interface with people like that when I'm talking, but anyway, that's just a side note. The idea of this podcast, for those of you that this is the first
Wait, what
time
about the
watching-
living land?
Oh, okay. Well, the living land is like an idea where everything is alive, basically, and so you have to have like a sustainable, respectful relationship with it, no matter what. Conversely, in like Australia, it was really interesting. In Aboriginal culture, there's a lot of different Aboriginal cultures. There's like more Aboriginal countries than there are European countries. If you look at the Aboriginal map of Australia in terms of the tribes, I mean, Australia is fucking gigantic in the first place. And they have this really interesting idea of like something called dream time. And
I've heard of this.
Yeah, there's a certain like, they speak of life and existence itself with this really, really fascinating ephemeral quality of like how everything sort of just like comes in and out of existence, almost like maybe liken it to a mirage.
Ooh. It is great to be able to make hand gestures.
Right, we were probably doing them before.
Yeah, there was just silence before, really.
Yeah, but now there's so much communication.
Change the color.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were about to introduce.
Oh yeah, so the idea for this podcast, right, is what's the idea of a friend? I mean, broadly, it's somebody who would make you better than who you'd be by yourself, right? So that's why you're with them. And so, that's how Matt and I feel about each other, right? We put each other in the friend category. And so we just sort of figured that, well, maybe if we enjoy talking to each other, maybe other people would enjoy hearing it too.
The historical record is enriched when people decide to
Converse.
Yeah, converse and report it.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of like, okay, I would consider when you're always literally conversing, yes. But there are people that quote unquote converse, but they're actually in echo chambers within themselves, and the only interaction that they have with each other is so that they can bounce off each other to align themselves to more echo chambers of themselves. Now you could call this converse, but if you really look at it, it's not actually that. It's just really, really awful codependence.
This can happen. Although I feel like there's like that, the codependence, and then like somewhere beyond that where it's like you're a bunch of academics and you're just like arguing about something that's not quite personal, but you're like trying to.
But it's so personal.
Well, sure.
Like Clarence Shudwick, just made up that name. He's like trying to publish this paper, and he's like, everybody with this hypothesis in this area of science is going down for this paper. Like Clarence doesn't give a fuck.
It's been known to happen. Well, I was just thinking about the kind of conversation where it's like you're just charting out the possibilities of different ways, like counterfactual situations can branch off from each other.
It's so hard to be objective.
Because it's true. Because I mean, you can get sort of like addicted to like mapping out like the space of possibilities, maybe like codependent relationship, because just sitting around mapping out possibilities all day, the same things.
doing anything.
Doing something about it. But yeah.
Like they say of children, they have infinite potential. So beautiful, but like, what the fuck are you gonna do? Because if you don't do anything with it, then you actually end up doing pretty much nothing, even though you had infinite potential. So there's a quite coinciding factor between doing and potential.
Yeah. Although, at any given moment, there's like a certain standard things that people think that are worth displaying, or like to the public, or like is defined as productivity, or like something worthwhile.
Yo,
and so
right?
That line is mobile.
Think about
really
that line of success for you, right? It's so tied to things that you didn't make up. And that's, that's pretty necessarily true. I mean, like, I had pants, like, before the fuck I knew what pants were. Like, when I was born, they were like, put some pants on this baby, right? And then I got, like, shoes and shit. And I got shoes now. I didn't invent these things. Like, I'm standing on the shoulders of, like, a lot of giants.
So many clothes have been made. I was thinking about that show I was telling you about earlier, the Durrells, this like show on the BBC.
Remind me?
About Lawrence Durrell, but really his brother Jerry Durrell, who wrote the books. Lawrence Durrell was a British novelist. His brother was a naturalist, Jerry, and they turned his books into a TV show called The Durrells, about how their mother moves them to Corfu. England's too rainy. Corfu is a beautiful Greek island, and they have many hijinks when they're there. Corfu.
How not Greek does Corfu sound?
Well, yeah, like what is it? What does it sound like?
It sounds Asian.
It has like that sound.
It sounds like East African, or Corfu. It sounds more African than Asian.
They, it's an interesting show. The well, this is not what I was originally going to say, but I'm just thinking about it. It's just the fact that, like, on the one hand, there's like the older brother, like Larry, who is the famous novelist. Like, I have some of his books. There's some lines in the show, such that like Larry writes to dazzle, whereas Jerry, the naturalist, writes to edify, to entertain, to explain.
I would prefer the second.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like there's something about somebody being overly self-conscious about what it means to be like a writer's writer, as opposed to like just getting right in there with words.
It's like Nas says, I'm a man's man, a rapper's rapper, GODSON will be none after.
You can say that about Jerry Durrell.
Jerry Durrell, shout out to Jerry Durrell. I would consider myself an artist. But hey, I mean, look at Nas's career, how it went. I mean, Jay-Z said it really well. He's like, that's a one hot album every 10-year average. And there's a thing about being like an artist where the things that you present, like your whole life is your art. And the crescendos of your life will be in so many different places that a lot of people, I think, won't see. But I mean, are still completely valid.
Well, yeah, like in the show, you see the way that like Larry is always trying to sort of like create experiences or like does things in order to like have like experiences like per se. Whereas Jerry is just like out there being like, I love these animals. Like I'm just literally in the wilderness all day, like just staring at a wall, looking at like how many bugs are here, taking care of the flamingos, this goat over here, like doing these experiments. And somehow, the content of it comes first, whereas it's like this first comes this engagement.
If you don't fall in love with the work,
hey, man.
If you don't fall in love with the work, you won't fall in love.
Yeah. Whereas, Larry errs on the side of like hipster.
Yeah, sort of almost like
Because the thing I was thinking about
like a
before was
possessionalist.
possessionalist.
Yeah, I sort of made up that term.
Hold on.
Well, like a possessionalist would be like, oh, okay, here's like this function or this artifact, right? Like some type of like idea that you could like, postulate, like a chess game or something, or like an artifact. Like here's this leather jacket. I feel like a lot of hipsters probably have leather jackets, but to them it's like
So yeah,
it's a
like
possessionalist
the
thing
item.
because they're like, oh yeah, I got the item just to perpetuate a vibe, and that's useful. You got to do that. Like people wear certain clothes in certain places, and you can perpetuate the vibe in the sense that, oh wow, like that person was professional or whatever. Like the only reason I'm wearing a bow tie is because it's formal Wednesday and we fuck around at work and get formalish. So this is why I'm doing that today. But also, like, just the fact that I'm wearing clothes perpetuates the vibe of being warm, right? That's a literal vibe too. So there's a lot of different ways you can spin.
I was gonna say it's like in the show, there's a moment where like it turns out that Larry's friends with Henry Miller, who's like a famous American writer, who like he's great, like he's a very interesting guy. But in the show, he like is just, and maybe this is in real life too. I don't really know, but he just goes around naked all the time. So like, this is the case when they go meet him in this apartment in London, but then he comes to visit them in Corfu, and it's like you had to admit it's a great setup because he's like there, like in the Mediterranean, he's like on the beach, and he's just got like his typewriter and a desk, and he's just kind of standing there, naked, just kind of surveying the scene, like
About to
the
write his
god
epic.
Apollo, wearing his glasses.
I imagine that he had the same glasses that Blaine, the 7th gym leader, had in the Kanto region of the Pokemon game.
I wish I remembered enough to know if that's true.
It's true, for sure. I feel it in my heart. Pokemon very, very seldomly lets me down. And there's very few things I can put in the low let down category. But there's certain things that are like somehow so timeless that they just carry on. And they just like continue to be relevant. And I think about that all the time, like what is it that's valuable?
Well, yeah, because like there's like real animals.
And then there's
And on the one hand, there's like Digimon, which it's like they're like Pokemon, but somehow shittier.
I don't know. Arugamon was pretty cool.
Some of them are cool, but I feel like they don't have as much uniqueness in some way or other than the Pokemon.
For
like,
sure.
yeah, like they wouldn't like stick in my mind the way like Bulbasaur or like something like Charizard would.
Well, their story sucked.
I guess that's what it was.
The writing was bad, but the premise was cool.
Oh, definitely.
Premise was super cool. Premise was probably more.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the question. Do you think it's
closer
the
to
story
happening.
design that like makes the Digimon less memorable, or just literally the character
There's
design itself,
such
just the way they?
No, there's such cool Digimon, man.
Mhm.
There's such cool Digimon. I really think a lot of it is the writing, but because it was like these kids that were like sucked into this virtual world that like existed that had actually been created by humans, like a digital world that had been created by humans, and then somehow they got sucked into the game, and so then they had to like work with these Digimon to like get out and like solve this whole war or some like conflict in the Digimon
I had
world.
forgot about this.
But it's like that's totally gonna happen. I mean, you can play a video game right now, like it's the same thing. But I mean, in this, it's just like you can't get out. But like, what if you're in a fucking augmented and visual or virtual reality game where you were like locked in? Like, what if you actually paid money? You're like, okay, I want deep immersion. So like they're like injecting you with stuff and to like keep you alive, like syringes, so you can like still get water and shit and nutrients. And you're like, okay, for a period of 48 hours, it's so immersive that yeah, I pay to no matter what, I won't get out for 48 hours. Or something like that, right? And then you're just trying to like beat this crazy VR world that you're in. But how different is that from reality now? I mean, what's a time scale to a being with more or less mass?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly true that
When I die,
there's no question, like if you had a VR headset on, you're like so like immersed in any virtual world, it's as real as any world.
as much as you can
Yeah, I mean,
integrate with it.
Yeah, totally. It's not different. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Where is the boundary line? Because it's like,
That's gonna
you know,
happen.
well, it was
in our,
designed by a person.
it's gonna happen in our
But then this
lifetime.
house was designed.
Mark
by a
my
person.
words. It's gonna happen in less than 10 years.
What?
Less than 10 years, you're gonna start to see not just it happen, but you're gonna see an epidemic happen. Because you're gonna see, from an evolutionary biology standpoint, you're gonna see these worlds and these feedback loops that interact with the patterning of our neural networks and our physiology that is not compatible with the timescales that evolutionarily we've come to develop and up until very recent history.
Yeah,
It's a stimuli.
Well, yeah,
And it's gonna
you could argue that's already happening.
it is. But I'm talking about like on a crazy level. I mean, actually, it's already happening on a crazy level, but it's going to get so much crazier. You're going to have people that, if they have enough money, and maybe even in some scenarios, even if they don't have almost any money, like maybe they get paid to stay in these games because they get paid to like, in a way, they're like, okay, yeah, we'll feed you as long as you're part of like this massive online game and like you're contributing to the society in there. So we'll like feed you like really, really minute nutrients. But it keeps you alive for like ever, like no worries. You can just keep playing this game. Dude, people will opt to do that.
Well, certainly the moment when like you can play the game and that can be your living, it's unclear to me why. I mean, people spend a lot of time.
It's unclear, you said?
It's unclear to me why they would leave in general, which is to say,
Dude,
if you're the kind of person who gets into that, you just do that forever. If you're the kind of person who would just do it for money, then you do that.
well, think about,
and that would be your employment, and then you just, do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, but think about like existence in this plane, right? Like they say that reincarnation is when your consciousness has been attached to some skaras, which are impurities of self, either from craving, like you just can't feel equanimous and centered without this thing, and until you get it, you're gonna feel off-centered, or you're gonna be like, until this thing goes the fuck away, being adverse to, you are like, I just can't be equanimous and centered. So you're either craving or being adverse to, and when you die, if your consciousness still feels attached to these cravings and being adverse in different ways, to a certain extent, you will still materialize your consciousness in this plane of existence. You will continue to live out these cycles until you are detached from them enough that you have distilled in whatever way, or the opposite of distilling. I mean, it can go in any way. And it's all past the God on this crazy journey of just experiencing the fucking self and all phenomena. So even for the people that go into these machines and don't come out, I guarantee that you can still find God. I guarantee that you can still understand the secrets of the universe. Because what is essential is ever present.
Sure, yeah. That makes sense to me. I love this idea, which I was recently reading about. Because you can find it everywhere. That,
I'm gonna get some more water.
You keep reincarnating, until you reach enlightenment. But
what's enlightenment?
I
mean, if you have enlightenment, that's a juxtaposition, right?
But just the funny sort of reverse incentive where it's normally you're worried about.
It's like attaining the opposite of attainment.
How do you mean?
Well, you're like, I'm gonna not worry about attaining things, and then I will attain a state of being from this lack of attachment to desire.
Sure. Well, I wonder about in the case of video games are they're particularly imbued with magic when they're like multiplayer, or like where it just sort of becomes less like you playing
So
a video
dynamic.
game
Oh my
and
god.
there's some like mysterious programmer behind it, but where you're just like in tune.
Someone
with other
shoots you
people.
4 times in the head with a VR and then they teabag you. You're like, oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's like touching another person.
I'm gonna get him.
but just through
Valhalla,
different
Halo
kind of
3.
mediation. Yeah, I think it's. I think all the time about like for many years now, it's been an interesting question. Like, to what extent can you take like what people do when they play a video game and turn that in itself into like value, monetary value, like the captchas, put in there. Little captcha. And
I
it's
was
like
talking to
all of that is helping some neural networks comprehend.
I was
images.
talking to a dude about this last night,
Mhm.
and we were talking about the idea of like commerce and just getting shit, right? And it's like, if you get paid, the whole idea is whatever is paying you, unless you're like somehow conning them, but at least if you're not stealing from them, aka they're deciding to pay you, then they're giving you money because they think that whatever you're giving them in return is actually better than the money.
Right, like, and they, clearly.
Or else they're not
have
gonna give it
that
to you.
Than the money.
Or they're going to give you less money. And so when you think about it that way, it just busts everything wide open, because it's like goes back to the idea of a friend. Like, I wouldn't even. It's hard to even think about the monetary value of like our interactions, because they stretch so far past just what is traditionally considered financial, but is still well in the possibilities of commerce, because we trade in ideas and vibes and feelings and experiences and reflections and I don't know, like other synonyms. Shit. Adjectives.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about it like, money in some ways is like a wild card that you can spend on anything. And so
Wild card.
anytime that you try to define
That would be such a cool name for a currency in a video game. Wild card.
Wild card. So you're trying to define like value, and we just realize like the value is often framed in I mentioned the word counterfactual earlier. In a counterfactual way, it's like the value of something is.
It has to be.
Yeah, like it has to depend on all the things that you could do, say, with that money.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, you spent $20 on going to see the movies, but you could have spent that on this. But what's so interesting about that is it like depends on your notion of like what's a possible world, or your ability to like accurately comprehend
Potentiality.
all of the possible things you could do, which like who can do that?
Nobody can do it.
Yeah.
Well, everybody can do it, but they can't do it like to finish the circle. And I think I actually think you can. I think it's actually quite simple, but I can't tell you. If you experience it, it goes far beyond anything that can singularly be materialized that can represent it, except for the thing itself. So to actually talk about it, it abstractifies it in a way where it's no longer fully in its cycle, because you viewing it finishes the cycle. So it's not something that can be reconciled on the outside of yourself and be like, that's it right there.
Okay.
It's the whole viewer/phenomena experience that creates it. So you're like ultimately entangled and imbued with its power and this crazy relationship.
Sure.
I feel like I had some bigger point, but went along the wayside.
Well, it somehow reminded me of the thing I was going to talk about that we were talking about earlier.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah.
What was it? Well, it all started when
Obama and that guy.
Well, for me, it sort of started the other night where I was like watching a lecture by, Zizek, Slavoj Zizek. He's like this.
Dude, I don't know any of the people that you know.
When I was in college, like he was somebody that like it seemed like everybody was reading. Like this is really on everyone's mind. And
I can't say the same.
he had a cool thing. He was like very well read and like a lot of different kinds of philosophy, but like mainly kind of like continental philosophy. And it was like, in the sort of psychoanalytic tradition, specifically Lacan.
What is continental philosophy and what is Lacan?
Well, Jacques Lacan was a French psychoanalyst.
Okay.
Who I guess got to start analyzing people in the 30s, but later on, kind of wrote a lot of theory that was very influential. Just in you would like it, it's all about sort of subject and object and this sort of
I used to think that the best superpower ever would be understanding of the subject-to-object relationship, but I have since rescinded that when I heard that Elon Musk said, what would be the best superpower actually to be the luckiest? Because you would always, although you always think that whatever you would be doing was best if you had whatever powers you had.
Right, yeah, trusting the genie to know better than you.
It would ultimately be that just, you would never really know, but the best circumstance somehow, if you could be the luckiest, would always befall you. But that doesn't actually save you from any experience. In fact, I think almost necessarily it might cause you the most agonizing pain that's even possible in the entire universe.
Yeah, I mean, lucky's yet.
Almost necessarily.
Yeah, because it's in 50 years, some law of the universe changes and nobody experiences pain anymore. So it's now's a chance. Little do you know, to experience the most exquisite pain before the pain valve, faucet gets shut off forever.
Yeah, you don't want to get.
Because you don't know. It's the context. Ever.
You don't really ever know the context for your existence fully now.
So, continue my explanation. Zizek, it's just someone I followed over the years. I felt after, he's got a great way of being as a philosopher. He's got this sort of Eastern European. He's constantly sniffling and grabbing his nose. This is sort of spatial gestures, not just voices. It's just great to watch him. Although this lecture that I watched, he had a cold and his nose was so red and he kept grabbing it. And we listened to it with just the audio, but I just kept imagining just drinking glass after glass of his snot. I hear it. Just
drinking. Wow.
But anyway,
so graphic.
I was going on this whole thing because I was I sort of stopped caring about Zizek around 2016, around the time of the election. I don't know why. I just felt his brand of provocation was something I didn't really need in my life anymore. Then more recently, I just watched a lecture of his, and I kind of liked a lot of things he was saying. But one of the things I was thinking about was he were reading of the alt-right, and
a reading of the alt-right.
Yeah,
that would be quite a cafe circle group.
Which the things he was saying was I just felt were sort of dated, or.
So he was describing the alt-right, but he was actually outdated in his point of view.
I liked a lot of the other things he was saying. This I felt fell short, and I was just thinking my own experience of it. Because the thing I was alluding to at dinner was just this sort of. I've been recently going through my writing and trying to figure out what was different about the years 2014, 2015, 2016, and then after 2017, 2018, and
a whole new world.
Just this feeling of the earlier era being the culture being dominated by just sort of visions of the apocalypse and conspiracy theories. I was I studied literature in college, and I felt around the time that I graduated, it was if you'd asked me where is the most exciting stuff happening in literature today, I would have said similar to decades before, the French artists Jean Dubuffet famously kind of invented the category of outsider art. You would go to psychiatric
what
hospitals.
Year is this?
I guess he started doing this in the 40s and 50s.
Word. Great time to go to mental hospitals. They're all fucked up motherfuckers.
Yeah, but they were,
shout out to World War II.
letting them make art, for example. And so,
that's so cool.
There was this sort of suddenly this influence of people who, like, let's say or it might be creative, might be talented, but to the extent that they're like a little bit crazy, like whatever that means, perhaps they're better like lightning rods or like antennas for like the kind of general vibes that like propagating around a culture. And
I think about that.
sure,
Right? Like how much are like the product of the culture thing, like you, like, yeah, okay, well here's these figures like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or whatever, but they are as much necessary and a byproduct as everybody else in the culture. In fact, the people, if you think about how many people you needed to make Apple successful, in a way, like those people are actually way more relevant almost in terms of how things have turned out than the founder in a way.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it takes a village to raise a child. So true.
An iPhone.
It takes an iPhone to raise a child.
It takes a village to raise an iPhone.
Also true.
I was outside the country for 3 years, and I left before the election started, and I was in Thailand. And then while I was still in Thailand, Trump was elected president. And it was so funny because like all the news that I was hearing internationally, it was all like, none of it was like, wow, this seems like Trump, like seems like the movement that needs to happen for America. Like nobody was saying that outside the country when I was in Thailand. And then once he became president, everybody was like, wow, these crazy Americans, like they've really done it now. It's just really interesting that this has happened. And then I go to New Zealand and they feel the same way. And I go to Australia and they feel the same way. But coming back here, it was really interesting because a lot of people, it was really useful in a lot of ways because it revealed a lot about people. And I'm so grateful to Trump for how much bullshit he's caused reveals the bullshit of others and be like, yeah!
I had many steps,
but
but I was eventually going to say something very similar to that. Yeah.
Like, you actually believe that, man? Like, I never thought, like, you felt that way. And before they'd be like, absolutely not. But now they're like, of course I do.
Yeah, well, because sort of the point I was trying to make is like I was, just trying to give a reading of like mid-2000s culture is like being obsessed with the idea of like the apocalypse and obsessed with conspiracy theories. And like when I graduated from college, like if you'd asked me where like the exciting stuff was happening in literature, it would have been on like blogs and just like random forums, and just you could spend hours and hours, just like reading conspiracy theories, which would just like suck you in. And it's like, me and my friend even at the time gave a reading of it where it's like, in a world where it seems like nothing changes, like even Obama is like elected, like hopefully change, but just really in some ways like reinscribes.
I want to make a change jar and put it upstairs so everybody who's got change can just put it in there, but I want to put Obama's face on it.
I do like Obama. But, basically, there's a way that you can read conspiracy theories as a kind of like, not just like a simplification of the world, right? But, a world in like a culture kind of obsessed with blowing people's minds or like pulling back the veil, right? Like so many people that I've had, like particularly Americans of like even like a certain age, like to strike up a conversation with them is
almost certain death.
Like a challenge of like, like I remember meeting like a Trump supporter in Jerusalem in like 2016.
Because like I'm not the biggest fan of him either. In a way, I am because like makes everybody realize the bullshit. But another way, it's like he's pretty abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
But people what's even more abhorrent is when people are like just complaining about the shit. It's like, oh my god, I don't want to hear this.
Sure.
It's not the best way to converse.
Yeah, I mean, that alone is a drag.
Sorry, I drew.
No. Basically, I mean, I remember it was like in 2011 that like Reddit started. And then, I remember at that time, like I was in college and like we were all like watching like Ancient Aliens. It's a great TV show.
Is it still on?
I don't know. I talked to a lot of people on the street. I wrote stories about what they told me, or different conspiracy theories. I like befriended this lady online during this era, and she had like some crazy conspiracy theory about like the TV show like The Mentalist, and how they were like sending messages to her and it related to some kind of like ancient plot involving like Julius Caesar and like all this stuff. And I remember reading like she claimed that someone from the show had emailed her from like a certain Hotmail address, and I like checked to see if that Hotmail address actually existed. It didn't, so I registered it and started emailing her under, the pretext, playing into her story. Although then I realized that's a terrible thing to do, revealed myself, and ended up having like an exchange with her. Whereas basically like what we do is not so different, like in the sense that like I'm a writer. What makes it literary is just perhaps there's like a certain ironic distance from, whatever it is, the ability to see mysterious connections between symbols.
Yeah, I think about that, right? When you think about like Stephen King, like, or people that are writing crazily just twisted or whatever things, or even fantastical things, you think, how much is it them and how much is it just things that exist that sort of pour out of them? I mean, that's how I feel about my art, pretty much almost exclusively.
Well, yeah, so I mean, I think that like the great conspiracy literature of like the 2000s is in so many ways like the result of people very, sensitive antennas
and then Trump's
who couldn't necessarily
okay.
Contextualize what they were experiencing.
Trump's like, I'm going to pour out, oh, you guys want to pour out things? Okay, I'm going to pour it all out, guys. Trump's almost like the master at that. He's like, no, I don't care what you say.
Yeah, because that's the thing.
My art.
After the election, I suddenly lost all interest in conspiracy theories. It wasn't interesting anymore. And I think that like largely, like probably a lot of people felt the same way. Because something about the appeal of the conspiracy literature was like, I mean, my friend and I was saying we had a theory about it, that it's just like, to the extent that you're powerless, you're sort of like kind of displacing the problem from being like other people or like capitalism or whatever. Like it's lizard people or it's like aliens or it's like whatever. It's just more fun.
You mean
and then it becomes like a form of like abjection in like a sort of, and yet prized secret like esoteric knowledge. By which I mean, you could be like, you took away my job, you took away my money, you took away my sense of pride, like all this, and like now you're gonna take away my belief in lizard people too. Fuck you! Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I thought there was
at
one.
the very least,
I thought that I would be safe because it was so untrue. It could just be this thing, but you somehow came upon
like, how dare you?
This belief that I had, and now it's all for naught. It's being torn down by society.
But then I feel like what eventually happens is like this.
Are furries accepted now? I don't know.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Furries, reach out to us.
But now I feel like it's very different. Right? The culture has perhaps moved away from like the constant, removing the veil, like the kind of conspiratorial mode, the kind of like X-Files mode, where like the whole almost like mode of like delivering information. It's like you got the board and you got the papers and like the mysterious thread connecting them all. And instead it's more like bitch, we're in Congress and like we're gonna like do what we want now.
Do they even do what they want? It seems like they just argue all the time. But maybe that's just part of the game, right?
Well, but what I'm saying is like,
all right, Mitch,
there's a new generation. There's a new generation of people in politics, and it's like there's very little interest in conspiratorializing about like the other side, insofar as like Donald Trump wears his shit on his sleeve. Like it's sort of like there's no deeper mystery.
Yeah, in a way. Although like, the only deeper mystery is I just want to know what's bothering him.
Sure. By the way, I'm not saying that there's no deeper mysteries, like as regards like shady business dealings or like various like real life
But his feelings.
conspiracies. But I just feel like, whereas
But that's
I
only
think
because
that-
even his lies
No,
are
'cause,
so
like,
unbelievable.
the
You're like,
culture
oh,
of,
I
like-
understand what you're actually saying, even when you're lying.
exactly, yeah, because the culture I feel like of say like let's say 2000 at least like 10 to like 2016, it was like very gaslighting. Like it was very like you're terrified of like climate change, like all this shit, but like all of the culture is basically designed to make you feel like you're the only person like freaking the fuck out about that. Like no one's doing anything about like all of the greatest problems, and like Republicans and Democrats both like wrapped in a mask of kind of like
Whose fault
political
is that?
correctness. Well, it's a complicated story about why that came to be, but I think that like that's the thing that kind of like almost like bipartisan consensus of just sort of like banking on not having to tell the truth in a certain way, to the extent that Donald Trump.
I think it was CBS. They got a lawsuit for lying, and then in court they were like, CBS is an entertainment company. It's not it's not a news corporation, apparently, or it was one of these news networks. Pretty sure it was CBS though. And so they're like, oh, okay. Well, then I guess if it's more about the entertainment than the truth, then. But of course, then they say, oh, but we're like a news network, like on the thing. But then you could say, oh, well, that's part of the entertainment. Like Stephen Colbert, used to say he was like a reporter and shit. But that was part of his act. And you're like, oh, okay, of course.
Sure.
And so at what point, like with Donald Trump, it's sort of like he says all this ridiculous shit and however much he believes or doesn't. And it's almost like it's a win-win, because if they let it slide, then great. And if not, he's like, that was so ridiculous. How could I possibly believe that? Come on, I was just trying to make it happen by whatever means necessary. And it was actually so preposterous in the first place that almost then people are just like, of course, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool.
I think also there were like a lot of like collective experiences that like set 2016 onwards, like in relief, like not just one thing you can say is like you can criticize the alt-right, and you should, but like the very fact that they provided an enemy
Definitely
for
criticize
people
the
to go
alt-left, too.
out like of the
I'll
house
have to be one-sided.
and like show up and
That's where the
feel
alt-right
victorious, and not alone.
That was but the social justice warrior age is coming real strong now.
Yeah,
I wonder
it's
how
great.
long it'll last.
I mean, I think the question is, can you find the right opponent? Can you find someone who's going to make you a better person or
Yes.
a better side by arguing with them?
Yes.
Like, you shouldn't be so lucky
Yourself.
to find that person.
Yourself. Only you can prevent wildfires. It's all about you.
Sure.
And that's what the social justice warrior is primarily as a, almost necessarily,
Well,
they
yeah,
will
so-
not look at
no, but
themselves to that extent that they would criticize others.
I mean, my point is that in contrast to the years running up to
Same
the
with all right
2016
people.
election, it's like after the election, people had these certain collective experiences, like whether it was like struggling against like fascists together, or just even being there on election night. In general, feeling like a rupture or like a radical change was possible, maybe not the one that you desired, but like is possible, as opposed to the like endless like hamster wheel kind of feel of like the years leading up to it, where it was like, we all ran out naked into the streets like when Obama was elected, but like he ended up being like largely a centrist in many essential ways. So there's like this way which, well, you can just imagine to like infinity, where just like very slow incremental change, just like sold as radical change.
It's almost like a star that you see from millions of light years away that's died like a long time ago, and you progressively get the image because of the light and at the distance. And you're like, oh, great, here's the symbol of change. Oh, yeah, I can tell that from this trajectory, it's going to get really good. in like a million years, we'll see this be a
Don't worry about
totally
it.
different thing.
It'll be better.
Here's all this tokenism. In a way, Trump
Whereas
is almost
I
like,
think
where he's like,
I think that people on the left have like recognized that like so much of the problem was like worrying about what the other side would say, or like preparing to like debate against them, or like thinking about everything as like such practical.
Well, now we're in the wrong.
And now you're just like yeah, you're just like no, like we're just gonna do this.
Everybody just says wrong to each other, and this they're like no alternative facts, reverse, vice versa, whatever. But Trump with the drain the swamp thing. In a way, he actually kind of did it because he's just like, yeah, we're going to drain the swamp. We're going to overflow it. Like, let's fucking go, people. And then it's like, whoa, what the fuck is going on in the streets of D.C., you know, and like the legislature and everything. And people are like, oh, shit.
Yeah, like what's so interesting to me is this moment where like the greatest, it seems to me the greatest readers of conspiracy theories, like, to some extent, wanted to elect Donald Trump the most. Like, it was the most entertaining thing to them, like, in their subreddits, etc., to, bring a kind of conspiracy to life. But then at the very moment of their success, it completely falls apart because, like, no one even cares about conspiracy theories anymore in the way they used to, I would argue. Precisely because
it manifested.
Yeah, exactly. It's not different.
Mm-hmm. What's different now is to be a real motherfucker. Like, I would
because the conspiracy is like in the reactive.
I was on Tinder, right? And I see these chicks in their bio. They're like, let's be a fake YouTube couple and make $60,000 a month, LOL. And it's like, man, like, maybe you don't actually mean that, but definitely there's people that would do that. And I'm just thinking like, whoa, that's so dangerous. But it's actually quite common in this day and age and encouraged. It's like, yeah, just make this perception creative. Like, it's all good. Like, it's the name of, like, entertainment or art or, like, getting commerce for whatever. Like, oh, yeah, CBS. It's a fucking entertainment thing. Like, oh, ha, ha, ha. Like, we can say whatever on YouTube. Are we even exposed anymore? Like, we're just saying it, but that doesn't mean it's actually true. And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And that's sort of like the weird world we're in, where now the people that through all interfaces are able to tell the truth, which is increasingly hard because you have to learn how to navigate these landscapes for your truth to not be overly interpolated, and even still it will be. But
Sure.
for your light to shine through is essential, but it's rare. It's rare. It's almost highly discouraged, but never has it more been admired at the same time.
Yeah, because telling the truth, it's not so simple as like stating facts that happen to be true.
Nobody gives a fuck about those anymore.
I mean
everybody does that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a more complicated notion. I mean, it's like in literature we talk about like verisimilitude as being something that you create.
What is verisimilitude?
It's really just fancy word for like truthiness, because it's just like
the act of being true.
The act of feeling true. I mean, this is the thing. Like, you can describe literally events in the actual sequence they happen to, and that might seem completely unbelievable to someone. Which is to say, whether something actually happened or not is not what makes something plausible or seem like it's true. It's like a completely different kind of construction.
Seeming like you're true is almost like one of the ultimate superpowers.
Yeah.
Because as long as people are convinced that it's true, they'll walk and then they'll fall through the thing, die in the hole or whatever.
I liked like Zizek had a good definition of philosophy.
I'm gonna try something where we minimize this. Can we minimize this? And I want to see if it still goes.
The Big Z was like talking about. Well, it's so different without that. I feel suddenly.
Yeah, it's so much more here.
Naked, yeah, like.
Welcome to the room. Yeah, that's how I felt. I was like, I don't want to be.
Yeah, something about that.
I don't want to be.
Yeah, really
I don't want to be unnecessarily self-aggrandizing, where, I mean, maybe more people relate to that in the social media age, but that's not what either of us are really here for, right? Even now, I feel less of an echo chamber and more of a on course, on pace. I heard David Goggins say something really interesting. He's he's a really interesting dude, but basically, do you know David Goggins?
Yeah.
Amongst other things, he's the first dude, or actually the only person to ever do Army Ranger School, Navy SEAL School, and paratrooper school for the Air Force, and be in all three special forces. And he said, "I never work out with music." And when he said it, he was doing it in a video, and he's doing fucking pull-ups while he's talking. And he's like, "I never work out with music because see, this music in here, so these motherfuckers, they need it. They need the external motivation. But what happens when it's not there? If you rely on it, you'll crumble." He's just doing fucking pull-ups the whole time, and it's like, yeah, it's true. I mean, I find myself all the time being like, "Oh, 5 more minutes on my screen," or whatever. We have to. I mean, interfaces are useful. Like a tool is an interface. Like this is an interface. 420 plays it. I don't want to stop doing that, but I can't lose myself in it.
Yeah. I was thinking about like Zizek's definition of like what philosophy is supposed to do, and how it's like really like the science of questions, and how, you know, sometimes the way that you ask a question reproduces the very like circumstances that gave rise to it. Asking the question to begin with, certain questions, like the way you frame the issue reproduces the problem.
Well, that's what science is, right? You have to do the whole experiment.
You gotta solve that. Yeah, you gotta solve that for the factors. What's going on?
Solve out for the factors.
I'm sorry, you know, I keep getting these texts. I'm sorry to do this during a podcast, but I hope everything's okay.
Is anyone
It's just
mortally wounded?
something that's fine.
All right.
Namely, my mom. Talking about stuff, but nothing life threatening. Anyway.
What stuff can be pretty life-threatening.
It's just, I think it's just some politics.
Or like life smothering.
Some little tweets. Dun, 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 dun.
Shout out to his mom.
Yeah, she treated us to dinner tonight. It was very nice.
Yeah, in sort of like a really roundabout way that I didn't expect. It was pretty cool. We went to this restaurant, and I was like, it was like around the corner from where I live. Like, this is my crib, and she was like, I was like, "Oh, dude, I don't know about this price point." And he's like, "Oh yeah, well, my mom actually recommended this that we go here because that's where."
Yeah, we were driving past. We passed it. She was like, "You guys should go there. My treat."
Yeah, and so then when I got there, he's like, "Oh, actually, my mom, Jill," and I've like been around his family like heaps of times. Like, shout out to the Weiss family, they're awesome. And so yeah, we ate on Jill.
We ordered well.
Definitely need to
French
hang out with Jill more.
With meat and it had like some.
Yeah, it had like pulled pork,
Something.
onion soup. It sounds weird, but it was really good. Well, Matt, you want to cap it here?
Sure.
Sweet ass.
It's been good.
It's been great. Thanks everybody for listening. Episode 5 in the books, first recorded video episode. We're gonna do this for as long as it takes for it to take, and then we are really going. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I have some more thoughts about the alt-right. We'll talk about that next time.
Dude, always more thoughts about the alt-right. Cheers.
Cheers. Arvoyarns.